through 12 o'clock to make it as a visual aid. So just think about a clock, and the top half, 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock and up is sort of the ordinary world. Oh wow, I can do screen sharing. Why don't I do that?
I think you can. We tried to do it earlier today, but it might be off.
All right. Well, I will just describe a clock then. And then so 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, bottom half is sort of the special world, this place where this adventure takes place, this unfamiliar territory. So 12 o'clock noon, 12 o'clock, the story begins. We encounter, the hero is sort of just doing their ordinary thing, status quo. Then 1 o'clock, there's some sort of call to adventure. This could be a good thing, or it could be, something unwanted. But anyway, the main character of the story is, inspired or summoned to act. Often that's followed by a rejection of the call to adventure, like, no, I can't do this. I'm not good enough, whatever. And then eventually accepting it. 2 o'clock is some sort of assistance. It could be a mentor, or it could be some sort of magic potion or sword or whatever. And then 3 o'clock is when the hero departs, leaves the comfort zone, leaves the familiar world, and launches into this unknown, unexplored territory. So after crossing that threshold, 4 o'clock is kind of the trials. This could be, hey, welcome to the Matrix, let's learn Kung Fu. Or it could be, you've just crossed the invisible boundary into monster land, and now you need to, just escape some monsters right away. But 6 o'clock is the crisis. It's like the pivotal point for the hero. And so, 5 o'clock leading up to that is just sort of the approach. Like, all right, I know what I got to do. I got to go do it. And that 6 o'clock moment is really, it wraps in everything that has happened so far, everything we've learned about the hero and the situation. So this is where the hero confronts his or her darkest fear. Right, the one thing they've always been trying to avoid, now they have to confront it, and in a well-told story that ties into the plot, into the larger context. So 6 o'clock, is when the hero slays the dragon or confronts Voldemort or whatever, and it involves some kind of loss. Right, the hero has to die. Let me just think. Sink in for a second. Yeah, it metaphorically, right? It doesn't, maybe literally, or maybe just loss of innocence, or a loss of this child who had started the story has now become an adult. So after that pivotal moment, 7 o'clock, there's some kind of treasure, some kind of boon or reward, and this could be the golden fleece that was the purpose of the quest or whatever. And then that trickles down. There's some sort of domino effect that this, could, require, this could instigate some sort of reaction from the world or of some sort. So that's kind of, there's some sort of result of winning this treasure, but the hero still has to get out of this unfamiliar territory and back into the home world, to cross that threshold again through that magic gate or whatever. And so that happens at 9 o'clock, back across the threshold. So 10 o'clock, new life. The hero has kind of gotten back where he or she originated, brings this treasure with, and uses it to resolve the situation that got started in the first place. Right, that whole 1 o'clock thing is now being resolved by the return, and then 12 o'clock is a new status quo. Like everything settles down. There's kind of a new equilibrium. And we're ready for the sequel. So,
right,
that's the hero's journey in a nutshell. And it's very elastic. Sometimes you cross into the new threshold, or cross the threshold into some new world, and then you meet this mentor who's going to guide you. Sometimes things are skipped or compressed. If you analyze some Hollywood action movies with this, a lot of times that 6 o'clock is like in the last 15 minutes, and everything is super compressed. But I'm sure if you think about your favorite book or favorite movie, you'll be able to see how this matches up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I'll introduce a couple of folks who are going to join us here in a second. So I was lucky enough, actually, when I was doing that video for TED Ed, I was working at a school called South Kent School in western part of Connecticut, and go Cardinals. And I was teaching English, and I was participating in the program that the whole school was involved in, which was based on the hero's journey. The school had taken this concept and said, okay, look, we've got 4 years of high school. Let's break it down and say, sort of we'll break it down into the hero's journey into 4 stages. And, we'll just do them, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and out. And when Andy Vadney, Nancy Lyon jump in, they can talk more about that. And then the other guest we're going to have is Clive. Is he going to?
I haven't heard back from him yet, but we'll deal with him if he arrives.
Yeah. So by way of introduction, in case he jumps in, Clive Williams is a practicing psychologist in Australia. He's got a book called A Mud Map for Living, which if you don't know what a mud map is, you can easily guess, but to me that's like the most archetypical Australian word. And the mud map for living is the hero's journey, this kind of cycle. And in his work with folks, he uses that to help frame their experience and reflect upon their lives, and and deal with trauma, and put it into a context that's empowering. But he'll talk more about that when he joins. So
cool. I'm going to introduce Thomas here. Thomas Sato is the chief hugger of the Hero Roundtable, among many other things.
Hello, everyone.
He's going to kind of co-host this with me a little bit. He's got a question for you to help maybe bring this home for some of the audience as well, and then we'll cross over and hear about applying this to a school, because I'm very excited about hearing that application.
Great.
Okay, so Winkler, you mentioned that it's multiple different sources or types of stories, whether it be film or a book or whatever. What's your favorite? Do you have like a book or a movie? What's your favorite example of the hero's journey in one or the other? Open question.
I have a few favorites. Yeah, I have a few favorites, and the one that I've used the most is The Matrix.
Okay.
That movie has a lot involved. I mean, I've heard it described as a good movie masquerading as a bad movie, because although it is this intense action chase scene movie, it really has a lot baked in. Like, there are these allusions to Alice in Wonderland, Plato's allegory of the cave. There's a lot in there, and the idea of Neo, having this call to adventure. Literally, the phone rings right in his hand, and he has to leave. And then he has to choose one of these pills, right? Do you want to remain in ignorance, or do you want to choose risk and knowledge? Right? Here's the apple in his hand, and then that sort of awakening into this whole new world is such a vivid example of this formula.
Cool. It looks like Andy's here. Thanks, Matt. Andy, Matt's just given a bit of an introduction of you. Can you tell us where you are and what you do and how the hero's journey started with you?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, sorry I'm late. It took me a while to figure out how to get into this thing. Sorry.
No problem.
You're fine. Don't worry.
Where am I right now? I'm in New Lebanon, New York. I'm the head of school of the Darrow School. And I have spent, there's my wife, Nancy.
Nancy.
And with Matt and Nancy, we spent years building a high school curriculum that was built entirely around this idea of the hero's journey, and the idea of the metaphor of personal transformation. And so we took each of the stages of the hero's journey, the 4 major ones as we saw them, and we built them into each of the grade levels at the prep school we were at. And it was incredibly powerful. The kids today who are now in college and beyond still talk about how important that hero's journey was. And I'll just tell you one story. We did a lot with athletics at the school, and one of the kids was Isaiah Thomas, who went on to be a big star in the NBA with the Boston Celtics and stuff. And when he left South Kent after he graduated, which was the school we were building this at, I did a surprise visit to him out when he was at the University of Washington. And I went into, Coach Romar let me go into the shoot around before the game with Stanford. Isaiah didn't know I was coming, and I came into the arena and it was dark and he was shooting foul shots, and I came in and he saw me, and Coach Romar wouldn't let anybody talk to the players at first until after the practice was over. And so after the practice was over, he said, "Hey, Andy, come on over and see Isaiah." Isaiah came over and gave me this gigantic hug and whispered in my ear, "Now I know what you were talking about with the hero's journey." So really powerful, incredible stuff. And in my opinion, it should be in every single school in the world. And why it isn't, I'm not quite sure yet. But that's my quick story.
So how did you come across the concept of the hero's journey at first? Was it are you a Star Wars fan, or were you where did that come from?
I actually became interested in Joseph Campbell before I saw anything with Star Wars. And The Hero with a Thousand Faces and The Power of Myth. I had been, Nancy, my wife and I had been working in schools for a long time, in prep schools, and we were really interested in trying to find a metaphor for personal transformation that would resonate with kids today. And when I came across the Campbell stuff, I had read it in college, but it didn't really resonate until I saw the Bill Moyers piece on PBS with him. And then I went, holy crap, that now I remember all that stuff. That is good. And so we decided we would put it in. When I saw the Star Wars stuff for the first time, it was like, oh, now I get this. Yep, the Force, I get it. But I had loved it before I saw the Star Wars things.
Got it. That's how I got into this this whole subject and field was a very similar thing. I was using the hero's journey to help fifth graders with the transition into middle school. And as you say, they really get it, and it's really helpful. Yeah, I agree with you. It should be an important part of schooling everywhere. It's so applicable in school because those worlds are so discrete. That elementary school to middle school to high school, you are really entering a new world. So it's and college, of course, as well.
Why do you think it isn't everywhere?
It's not testable. I think is a big thing.
That's the great part of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think, when I proposed it, I was working at a camp at the time, a YMCA camp that had fifth grade camp as sort of the bulk of our outside of summer work. And just in talking to fifth graders so regularly, it was clear that they were quite concerned about that transition, and they weren't prepared for it other than academically. And so I started proposing it to my boss at camp as a program we could offer. And I was just told by him and another boss that no one's going to get this. It doesn't make sense. And it was funny because teachers were telling me, this is great, I'd love to do this. And I was brainstorming with them, in the evenings when the kids were all in the cabins. And it was just so, the kids resonated with it immediately. There was no confusion about what the hero's journey was when I explained it. It took 8 minutes to explain it, and they're like, oh, yep, got it. Makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think it's because it's not core curriculum and testable, and on the standardized tests is probably a big part of it. But some of it's just ignorance about the topic, I suppose. It's a bit crusty for people, maybe not as academic as they'd like. Yeah. So what's your, and Nancy, feel free to jump in if you want to share your experiences as well. But for the three of you, having built this out of school and having so much success, what's your experience been like with talking to other schools about it? Have you been able to convince anyone else to take it on, or is it banging your head against the wall? What's that been like?
I'd like to have Nancy talk. Is she on there?
Yeah.
I'm here, but that's really, I think I'm going to bounce that to Matt. Matt has really been very successful at transferring this to other schools. And actually, I'm going to remember, here's a little anecdote. I remember when Matt was interviewing for his position at South Kent, and he tapped into this right away. And I still remember his presentation to the class was basically, most stories, if not all, are either we're a band of brothers or we're different at the beginning than we were we're different at the end than we were at the beginning. That's Hero's Journey right there. So I'll toss it to Matt.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, no, I mean, that was one of the reasons that I clicked so immediately with the South Kent School. Is that? I can pass the mic to that. Someone wants to say something.
No, go on. I think someone just came on.
Okay. So yeah, South Kent School, the whole curriculum was based on, this hero's journey of each student basically on a journey trying to, encounter that 6 o'clock, what is this thing that I'm drawn toward and yet, fearful of in myself. What is it that the clock works that makes me tick? And, as teachers, every semester or trimester, every day, every lesson, we were simultaneously, teaching the content, but also trying to unlock that inside each boy. And, with that experience, and after this, video came out, I started to visit other schools and do kind of a self-contained workshop that introduces the model of the hero's journey, and then applies it to, books that the students are studying in their language arts or English curriculum, and also their favorite stories that they love, outside of school. And just like you said, Matt, immediately they get it. It's in our DNA. I mean, the reason that this formula is so popular is because, since the time we were cavemen sitting around a fire telling stories about the hunt or the flood, this was the format that we used. And so it's just baked into our, psychology. And so, in these workshops at these schools that I'm visiting, they click right away. And then, comes the part that they weren't expecting, where we flip it around and, look in the mirror and, okay, now look at your own life, your own experiences. How can you take all these events and view them in a new context where, they weren't just, bombs that went off through your life, but each one had a story arc to it, and that each one was a transformative experience that, okay, you lost something, but you gained something too, and that's how you grow.
Would you say that that's what's most important? They're getting context out of, or you're giving context to maybe negative situations or even positive situations that arise in the students' lives? Would you say that's why it's so important to have the hero's journey as a part of it?
I mean, I'll say a solid yes, and that was kind of the reason I wrote that book, which was to disseminate that idea to parents, teachers, coaches, everyone who works with folks, adolescents going through that experience, where at the beginning they're children and at the end they're adults, and for them to be able to when that teenager comes to this adult and says, hey, I had a terrible day, this is what happened. And the adult can look at it and say, okay, let's frame this though. Like this was the 6 o'clock. Like, how'd you get into this situation, right? What brought you to here? And then what are you going to do with this, right? How are you going to react and turn this to your own advantage and to your own growth? And Andy, do you want to follow up on that?
I think that's absolutely right, Matt. The interesting part for me, and we're at the school I'm at now, which is a 9 through 12 school, heavy on the kind of performing arts. We're going to put this in here now as well, and the part that I like about it is the fact that it allows for the metaphysical piece of things. It allows the unseen world to play a part in things, and that, based on the kids that I'm dealing with now, is one of the most important pieces that's missing in their education and in their lives. It's curious to me. I'm watching now as the whole coronavirus and everything is hitting the world, and people are jumping to the distance learning, and what they're trying to do is just recreate what they were doing in the classroom, and they're looking as close as they can get it to the classroom. They're basing that's success, and I think that's totally wrong-headed. I think what we need to do now is use this as a pivot point and look at, okay, what are we educating kids to do? And if we're not educating them to figure out who they are and what is their mission, why are they on this earth, we're missing everything. And so the coronavirus here, as it hit Darrow School in New Lebanon, New York, it finally given me an opportunity to open that idea up with the Board of Trustees and say, okay, we have an opportunity to do something different now in terms of education. And let's educate for the whole person. Let's educate for what is it that makes you you, and what is your point of being alive now. And that, to me, is what Joseph Campbell and the Hero's Journey is all about. It's trying to find out what that is, and this whole idea of looking at this as a continuum and as a cycle. And Matt, I love that TED Ed talk you did, and that video. It's awesome. I show it here as much as I can. That, to me, is what it's all about, is, who are you, and what are you here to do? And when education doesn't answer those questions, then we're wrong. And so what I don't like is the fact that everybody's going to try to recreate this education that's created this very mess in the first place. And that's not going to help us. And it's not going to help us get to where we need to go as a civilization and as a culture. The Hero's Journey does that. And that's what I like about it.
Right on. Matt, could you post a link to the talk in the chat here?
Sure.
The first time that I did a presentation on the Hero's Journey, it was at the camp, and I saw Raina was here, one of the people that worked at camp with me. I don't think she was there that summer, but I ran it for the camp counselors. And so this is a bunch of sort of 18 to 21-year-olds, and it went super well, to the point where they were able to, and I think I suggested this, but they were able to then position themselves not only on a journey themselves, because every summer the camp staff transformed, no question, but they were able to see themselves as the mentor on the journey of the kids that were theirs while they were there for the week. And it really gave them that sense of responsibility to guide those kids and remember that they were someone that the kids were looking up to. It was so good to do that. And I wanted to go back to the school for a minute and how you divide it into 4. Could one of you break down what the 4 sections are and how you figured, well, not how you figured, but yeah, which are the 4 sort of main steps that you're talking about with those 4 grade levels?
Nancy,
Are you talking about at South Kent?
Yeah.
Nancy, go for it.
Matt, that's yours.
All right. Well, credit to Andy and Nancy, who, when they came to South Kent, which was before I got there, that was a major transformation that they, developed and, conceived and implemented. And in keeping with the arc, you start as this kind of in this place of innocence, and you end in a place of giving back. And so it's been a while, but let me see if I can remember. So the fourth form was something like exploration.
You want me to do it? I'll do it.
Yeah, you do it.
Okay. What we did was, when we got to the school, we were curious about what made it successful in its past, because when we got to the school a few years before Matt did, everything had kind of crunched down to just didn't seem to make much sense. So I was really interested in what the past head of schools had said in their commencement addresses and things. And so make a long story short, we read all of those and came up with, there were definite themes that they were talking about, and there were 4 of them. And so we wrote them down on this big board, and then we came in a couple of days later, looked at the board, and we went, oh my gosh, those are the stages of the hero's journey. So what we did was we took the first one and the call to adventure, and we turned that into a sense of place and belonging for the 9th grade. The 10th grade was about trying to figure out what are your talents. You're going to look around and see what do you have that the group doesn't have and the group might need. Then we called that kind of the developing your talents. The junior year was the test for those things. And so you're going to try to identify what talents you have, what gifts you have. You're going to start to hone those. And then you're going to be tested to see if those are the right ones. Are those true and good for you? And then the sixth form, or the 12th grade, was the service, and service is something larger than self. And so we called the entire program the Hero's Journey curriculum. And the idea was, do you want to be a celebrity, which is take what you do and only benefit yourself with your new knowledge? Or do you want to be a hero, which is developing this knowledge and giving back to the community wherever you find yourself? And that's kind of the way we developed the curriculum. And that is what Isaiah Thomas was talking about after he had become famous and was at the University of Washington and later in the NBA. He was talking about, oh, I get it now. That is what you were talking about. And it really did work. And we built in different adventures for each of the grade levels that would really test them physically and spiritually and emotionally. So Matt, you went on the nautical journey. We would take the 10th grade and we would put everybody on these 2 tall schooners trips and send them out into the ocean, and they would have to navigate by the stars and everything. It was pretty incredible, and everything tied into each stage of the hero's journey that they were on. All the readings, everything we talked about was all geared toward that, and it was incredibly freaking powerful. I'll tell you that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, experiential learning is such an important piece of education. I don't think I got exactly the answer I was looking for before from Matt, so I'll ask Andy again. That when you've gone as a senior person in the school, if you've gone to conferences and things like that with other schools, what's the reaction to what you're doing? Because we were talking before about this should be in every school, but obviously not everyone is implementing it when they hear about it. So what has the reaction been?
Is that for Matt?
No, for you.
The reaction has been, when I would talk about it, like, what the hell are you talking about? You're doing what? And, how does that apply to college? And, that kind of stuff.
How many AP credits for that?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So it got to the point where I actually didn't go to conferences. I just said, you know what? If people want to know about it, they'll hear about it and they'll come to the school and see it, which is exactly what happened.
So you've had some schools that have come in and learned from you and gone back?
We had quite a few schools come and want to see it and see it in action, but they were not able to put it into place in their own school. Their boards of trustees were, not feeling the vibe. Uh, and so it just, we did what we did. And we even took it to the point where we bought a farm, 200-acre dairy farm that was connected to the school, and turned that into an organic farm. And it was pretty wild. What I'm going to do at the school I'm at now is basically put in the same thing here with the hero's journey in the program. And here, South Kent was all boys. Here we have incredibly talented girls and boys. So it'll be fun to watch them grab onto this and take it and run with it.
Right. Just for anyone who's new to Zoom or new to here, feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we'll jump onto those. The thing that you just said about the not getting the vibe is important for a lot of this hero work that I've been doing, and I think Matt's been doing as well, and you're obviously doing. It's almost that you have to find the one person within an organization that just loves it and is going to put the work into making it happen. So I wonder if the two of you or the three of you have got any suggestions on how to get people to get the vibe. What are some successful ways that you've been able to get someone to get it? Because it is that's the piece that we need.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andy said, okay, if the reaching out isn't working, just keep doing your great stuff and tweeting about it and posting about it, and the folks who are interested are going to hear about it and come to you, sort of a pull instead of a push. That's really works. Through I'm starting a podcast now, so through the TED Ed video, through the book, through the Hero Roundtable, Heroic Imagination Project, a lot of connections just start coming in, and those lead to more connections, and I think it's kind of a like a Harry Potter-esque secret society that you just tap into, and everyone's already connected.
Andy or Nancy, have you got any tips on how to get that spark happening or get people vibing?
Well,
I'd like to hear Nancy.
Well, I'll jump in. I'm at a different school. I'm at a 400 size co-ed, very traditional school now. Andy is head at a very small co-ed school, and the school I'm at is, like I said, very traditional. And there is one teacher there who has tried to implement a hero's journey curriculum, and he ran into obstacles. And this is my first year there, so I have not really tried to do that. But it's, now that I'm in a very different school setting, it's so relevant, obviously, and it's reaffirmed that it is relevant. And so next year I'm just going to do it myself. And I think the actions and results will speak for themselves, is my hope.
Great. Dolly just asked a great question. She's in education and is wondering if the route might be to put this into college for teacher training. How do we get that happening? Do you know, is there anyone doing this in college as well? And college might even be more strict as far as what courses they're allowed to offer and for credits and all the qualifications that are needed. But certainly that's the way to spread further, is to train the trainers, essentially. Do you know of anyone that's doing that in colleges?
That's a great question. I can't put my finger on any, but that is one target that I try to reach out to, especially with this book. It's written for them, so I'm constantly trying to pitch teacher education programs like, hey, this should be on your book list. You should be covering this. I wish I had a good example of one that does.
Yeah, you almost need to get picked up by someone to spread the book far and wide, don't you? It needs to become a course book or a
right.
Yeah.
If there were in every, every teacher training program, you've got your content areas, and then you also have like, this is, childhood development from, middle school, childhood development in high school. And, this is what the context of what these kids are going through in their, just their biological evolution. But it just seems like, an easy kind of hand in glove fit for that, as their psychology is developing. This is something that is, like I said, is baked into our DNA of how we view the world through these myths that, the whole source of this name, The Hero's Journey, comes from Joseph Campbell, who studied myths from all over the planet and noticed that they had this, similar framework. So, it's the skeleton inside all of the, stories that we still tell.
Yeah. Raina just asked for the book. Raina, that's the book.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's backwards. Christy, could you unmute yourself and make that point that you just made in the comments?
Yes, sorry about that. If you see my hands gesturing, there's mosquitoes and they keep swatting at them. I'm not upset or anything. Yeah, this whole hero's journey. So 10 years ago, I taught high school in the UK, and hero's journey was part of our curriculum. And as an English teacher, right now I teach transformation in a different way. But back then, I had no idea what I was actually teaching was this transformation of character. That is so important for any human being, but especially like young kids, teenagers, as they're trying to figure out who they are and how they work in the world. And if anybody had taught me, like pulled all the teachers aside and taught us this as if we were students, I would have got it. I just remember teaching like Star Wars and like Lucas Skywalker and like watching a movie and then grading papers when my kids watched the movie and then linking up the questions and answers. And that is such a waste of something so important to teach. So I don't know, maybe that's I'm sure you guys have, kind of worked this idea before, but I think that's so valuable. Teach the teachers, and then it brings me to what they teach.
I think,
Yeah.
Go on, Matt.
Sorry, so at some of the Hero Roundtable conferences where we've done, breakout workshops, we've had, lots of teachers show up to these conferences, and, I've done the kind of a smaller version of the workshop where we go through this, and a lot of the teachers, I've never heard of it, right? And they're like, wow, this is such a cool thing. How come I haven't heard of this? And I've been there, right? It wasn't until, I don't know, I think I was like 30, and, I was teaching my son some of his, language arts curriculum, and I was like, oh, what is this? This is a really neat, wow. And of course, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like you look, you see it in every story you touch now.
Yeah, and I think that has been one of the issues, is that it does just get taught as a literary tool or a way to watch movies or read books, right? But they forget the application to us, to the to transformation, to this is our life, this is what's happening to us, and this is why the stories are formed that way, because they inform us how to live our lives and get through challenges and share knowledge and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that, as a story, sorry to Thomas, if I might, and that to me is what's so important, is the power storytelling. It's a lot of times I feel like in academics, it's kind of put in its box, like, oh, this is imaginary, just stay in the box, and now we're going to go and the bell rings and we're going to do real work in calculus. But, storytelling is so important. I mean, you watch a news program and they frame it as, today's top story. Everything is, that our brains absorb is absorbed in the format of a story. And, the power of these, novels and movies that show us what is a heroic life, what is, the difficult choice, the selfless choice. These are powerful examples that, we should be talking about, as life lessons.
Thomas?
I was just going to say, when I learned about the hero's journey in high school, we learned about it as a literary tool. It wasn't applied back to our lives. It wasn't until way later at the Hero Roundtable that I was like, oh, this is I get it now. Yeah.
And Dolly's just made the point that it can be tough to get a school culture to change, and that often it's directed from the principal, and you need a dynamic principal. And certainly I've found that in getting my program into schools, but sometimes it's the assistant superintendent, or it's the superintendent's wife, or it's a particularly energetic teacher, or again, I think it's that the vibe or the spark. When someone's got it, they can put that work in. This is, I think, by far the Zoom that we've had over the last 3 days that's gone the quickest for me. So must be a topic I like. Can I get just some closing thoughts on how this can apply to adult lives? So we've talked a lot about schools and that approach. So how can we as adults use this, and or not how can we, but how do you use the hero's journey in your adult life?
I got a good one for that. I mean, with this podcast, I'm doing the Cave You Fear podcast. Check it out on Spotify. I'm interviewing adults and, asking them to kind of look back, reflect on their lives, and, pick out those kind of 6 o'clock moments, those caves that they feared to enter and found themselves in. And I think, like right now is a cave for everybody. I mean, there's a global pandemic. People that I know, one of my brothers, just got the news that, hey, 2 weeks from now, that's your last paycheck.
Ooh.
I mean, that's a call to adventure, not the one you wanted, but, it's going to be rough coming up. And, if he can, if he can frame this as, an epic adventure, it might make it a little more bearable.
What about, did we lose? Oh no, Andy's there. Andy, what about you? How do you use this in your life?
I use it everywhere in my life. I go back to another question that you asked. How do you identify the people with the vibe? And the answer is that you're looking at who has the expanded consciousness. That's did I lose everybody?
No, we got you.
Okay. What I have found is that the people who can understand this have an expanded consciousness, and you need to find those people in your organization, and you'll know them right away. They will be the ones who can grasp it first, because what we're talking about is much more than just the physical. And I started out by talking about that, but the thing about the hero's journey is there's a nod to the metaphysical in all of it, and that is the key. So in each organization, you're going to find 1 or 2 people, maybe more, who have that expanded consciousness. They will be able to recognize the vibe. What you have to do is show them that vibe, let them feel it, and then let them ask you questions. And then from there, you can expand it. You can't just dump it down on them from the top down. It won't work. You've got to want them to ask for it. And that's what I found. The second thing is, to your question, how does it work in my life? I have found that the stages of the hero's journey apply to every stage of everyone's life. So school, yes. Your first job, yes. Marriage, yes. First children, yes. Aging, yes. Dying, yes. It's all there. And so I look at it all the time in that context, and I try to frame it for people in those contexts.
One example of that, unless anyone wants to jump in, at one of the Heroes Roundtables breakout workshops, it was with adults. And when I asked them that question, can you think of an example in your life? I'll never forget one woman came back and she said, you know what? This is the cave I fear to enter right now is, I have aging parents, and it's no longer safe for them to live alone independently. And it's up to me, of all my siblings, I'm the one who's going to be the one who ends up making that call and saying, look, it's time to put mom and dad in an assisted living facility. And, she said, that's the cave I've been avoiding and trying not to, go there, but I have to, and that's as a, adult and middle age to, really flip everything upside down, where, up until now, your parents had been, not taking orders from you. And now all of a sudden you got to call the shots on them. So, just as an example of all those, adult stages that Andy just listed out, that's one that you can really, wow, that is, an example.
Yeah. Nancy, can you get back on the microphone and expand on what you just wrote about the tangible benefits? Because I that's such an important piece in selling this idea to anyone, whether it's a school or an organization or just another person.
Yeah, I used to have my students do self-evaluations, and I would ask them at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year questions that are really framed around the hero's journey, even if I wouldn't use those words. And toward the end of the year, I would then show them how the model applied, and there'd be those wonderful aha moments when they could see that, oh yeah, what we study or apply it to Napoleon, or the characters in Les Mis, or the USS Indianapolis, or whatever it is, that they can then see, oh yeah, I see how it applies to me. And then in individual one-on-one conversations with them, you could see, okay, you are facing this challenge now. How are you going to face this challenge? Are you going to rise to the challenge and become a hero? Or are you going to succumb and try to use it to your advantage for celebrity, or give up? And, the kids, they would get it. And that's what I mean by the tangible. And that's what I'm hoping to do at my school next year, is to focus on, yes, this can fit within a very traditional curriculum. And for me, it's not the metaphysical, it's the, okay, tangible, concrete, how does it benefit my students in a very concrete way? And I've seen it work. If we then show them examples from what we're studying, and then ask them to apply it to themselves. And at first they go, oh, I don't know. Oh, yeah. But then they really do get deeper into it and start thinking about it. And it works. That's the beauty of this. It totally works.
Yeah, and I think when I was working with fifth graders and middle schoolers as well, I would walk them through the hero's journey and explain it in 5 to 10 minutes, but then bring one kid up the front and have them walk through what their future hero's journey could be, and we'd get to the call to adventure and crossing the threshold into the new building, and then ask the kids, what are some of the things that might be on your path of trials? And they knew them all. And so being able to present it that way and having them prepare for the trials to come was I think super helpful for them. And I had one group of 8th grade kids who wrote up a guide to middle school based on their experience. This was their golden fleece, and they took it back to the 5th graders in the elementary schools and presented, because these 5th graders were about to embark on the journey, and their mentor arrived with a book, or with a presentation on how to get through middle school. So those really applicable, tangible things are important and available too. And but certainly that metaphysical transformation too is such a big piece. I'm going to finish up. Thank you very much for being here. If you guys could, Matt, you've put some links in there. If anyone wants to look into your schools a little bit more, or get in touch with you, Andy and Nancy, if you could put a link in the chat as well, that'd be fantastic. Thank you for being here. Thanks everyone else for turning up. Really appreciate the conversation. Like I said, it's probably the fastest one that I've had so far.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Thanks a lot, Matt, for inviting us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, look forward to seeing you at a Hero Roundtable soon.
Yeah, hopefully we can see you.
I think the chat stays saved when the thing gets saved. I'll publish the video in the next couple of days. All right. Well, thanks all. Have a good evening, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Nancy, Andy, and the Mats.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.